Radboud University in the Netherlands, and he tried to install a program treating addiction with ibogaine, and he confronted, as it seems, and he will share this experience with us, some problems in respect to the academic environment and its responses to psychedelic research, as well as the media coverage of some of the research and the ethical considerations about such research in the IRBs or institutional review boards or ethics committees, as we have them at university, looking and evaluating the research proposals which researchers bring up in respect to the patients and if they may do some damage to the patients, etc., etc. So welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much. Maarten and I, we were approached to speak at this conference, I think back in March, somewhere, way back. And about a year ago, we were starting the research that Maarten concluded with, which is a human study studying the effect of ibogaine as an anti-addictive treatment. And of course, we would have loved to give you the results of this study, but we don't have all the results yet. We're only halfway because it apparently takes a lot more time than we first planned. But so then I thought, okay, what can I tell you about the research we have done? And I can, because there are a lot of young people here, probably some of you want to do research. And for me, when you say research, it's an academic exercise. And so what did I learn from doing this exercise of trying to do research with psychedelics in academia? And I realize it's with an A and not with an E. And so, like it was just mentioned, doing psychedelic research in academia is very difficult because there are certain challenges, ethical. Doing research has to be ethical because of the Helsinki treatment, where every medical researcher has to conform to the rules of the Helsinki treatment, which prescribes that you have to do humane studies. So if you know somebody's going to die from your experiment, it's very unethical and you can't do that type of research. So when we started doing this research, like Maarten said, and like was, I think, mentioned earlier as well, ibogaine is a very potent substance, but it's also a very dangerous substance. And when you want to do this kind of research, you have to find out what are the dangers of the substance you're researching. This is one of the major ethical questions. Is it dangerous what you are doing, or is it safe? And to find data on this, if you use a regular medication, this has been produced by a large pharmaceutical company. They do large studies, they do animal testing where they test the lethal doses, they test all kinds of other parameters as well. But if you do research in psychedelics, you don't have a big pharmaceutical company who has done all this research for you. So you have to look at different databases. So you look at case reports of reported deaths. You look at people who were admitted to hospital, in this case with cardiac problems. And from this, you try to distill a profile of the dangers of ibogaine research. And probably you can also look at some similar toxins. So, like you mentioned, psilocybin has some of the same effects. And then that is the risk of administrating your substance. But there's also a different risk. The people who you are going to be treating, they have a life and a way of living, and they are who they are. And they are, in our case, under our treatment. So we have people who are eligible for this study, and you can imagine if you want to find out something about the clinical effects, you have to have healthy or relatively healthy people, because the things you are going to see, you want to be able to ascribe them to ibogaine and not to, for instance, an underlying disease. So you have to find relatively healthy people who are able to enroll in a study which in our case takes up to 24 weeks. So they have to be adherent to your treatment. So you can imagine that these people are actually people who are okay. They, in this case, are on methadone or on buprenorphine treatment, and they live a relatively stable life. And these people, we are going to give a treatment, and we don't even know if it's going to work. So we're going to say, we're going to take your stability, shake it all up, and hope for the best. But what if it fails? So this is an important question you need to ask yourself. Am I not doing relative harm to my patients? And also the other part, and we have experienced this in our trial, is these patients, they trust you as a doctor and as a researcher. But what if it really does go, well, the patient is still alive, thankfully. But what if it does go wrong and this patient then doesn't trust you anymore, or doesn't trust the whole field of addiction medicine anymore? Then this patient is now at home using more drugs than he was before. So these are questions you need to ask yourself before you start meddling in these kind of things. And real safety risks of doing this kind of research. Then there is another thing you need to consider when doing this type of research. As doctors, we are trained to find the best treatment for our patient. And we do this together with our patient, and we call that shared decision making. And something changes in your patient-doctor relation when you shift from shared decision making, I am your doctor and you are my patient, to I am your researcher and you are my subject. Because you suddenly have to be very directive. You have to tell people, we're now going to do this, and you have to do this, and you have to do this. And the patients we research are often quite, well, they have a strong character and a strong will and a will of their own, which is, of course, is great. But this can sometimes really interfere with your research, and you need to keep switching between, okay, I understand, and I am your doctor, but I'm also your researcher. So switching between those two roles is I think, is very important when doing this type of research. Now, as I already told you, finding the right patient can be very difficult. So at first we thought, well, we have a large stable population, we'll ask them to enroll. But they didn't want to enroll because they said, why would I enroll? I'm fine, I get my medication once a month, and I have a job, I have a family life. Please don't disturb me. So then we had to find people who were relatively stable. And then there's the thing of getting them to enroll. Because your relation as a doctor to the patient changes, for the patient a lot of things also change, and this can be very uneasy. A lot of our patients are very, well, not paranoid, but they don't really like when you start talking about doing research on them, and they think, oh, I'm going to be some LSD test subject or something. So you have to be very careful when motivating people to enroll. Then, as I said, getting them retaining them to treatment and follow-up is, of course, difficult. There's also a thing where there's a difference between medical data and research data. When somebody has to do a urine sample every week to show that they are clean, for the research, it's very important. And if they miss one, you say, okay, I have to treat this as a positive sample. But they say, no, I mean, we had a phone call, and I told you I was at my mother's, and you have to say, yes, I know. As a doctor, I know it's fine, but as a researcher, I'm sorry, you're positive. So this can really interfere with your treatment. and your research and your patient-doctor relation. Well, I could say about finance that it's very difficult, and we probably, for the researchers around, you all know how difficult this is. Then there's the last thing that, as a researcher, is very difficult to work with, is the layman ideas about what the treatment does. So I have a patient who tells me, okay, if I take the ibogaine, do I vomit? Because I need to vomit, because I need to expel all the toxins in my body, and the harmful effects I need to expel those. And as a doctor, or as a researcher, I say, please don't vomit, because I'm doing a dose-effect relationship, and if you lose half of the ibogaine, I don't know how much you've lost, so I don't know what my blood levels are saying. This is two very different worlds that you need to somehow bring together. All the hallucinations, all the dreamlike stasis, the out-of-body experience, etc., versus my serotonergic and dopaminergic pathways to the visual cortex and apoxia, etc., etc. This is two different languages you're speaking, the patient and yourself, and you need to somehow also bring this together. And we had this with our last patient. He said, well, I'm not here to quit cannabis, so I can use this on your ward. And he was smoking cannabis in our ward because he wasn't there just for his opioids. And well, of course, as a doctor, I have to tell him, please don't use drugs on my medical ward because we are treating other patients here as well, and they are here for their cannabis, etc. So these are the challenges we've met so far, I think. And I hope that for you, if you want to go and do research in psychedelics or are about to, or maybe join some research group, please take these things into consideration, because this is the process that is ongoing and that is very important to acknowledge if you want to retain your patients to follow up. Pick the right patients, speak the right language, and also consider all the ethical difficulties in this type of research. So thank you very much.
So, okay, are there some questions about this presentations? Yeah.
I have a question. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more in detail about the inclusion and exclusion criteria for your patients.
Yes, I can imagine that because I've only hinted at the study we've done so far, so I can imagine there are some questions about this. We've included relatively healthy subjects, people with no psychosis in their history and no major depression or suicidality, because of the reports we've had so far of people becoming either psychotic or there was one man in the Netherlands who killed himself after treatment. And of course we don't know if it is because of the ibogaine treatment, but well, it's a risk. Apparently it's a risk, so you have to be very safe, and that's why we excluded those people. They can't have any severe medical condition that interferes either with the metabolism of ibogaine itself, or with their or a cardiac disease, because there are severe cardiac risks involved with ibogaine treatment. So we excluded those people as well. And then there's some other, you can be homeless, you can be pregnant. There are some use of certain medication is excluded as well, either because it has an effect on the metabolism of ibogaine, or it has an effect on the cardiac rhythm. And so then the additive effect would be a double risk, and we can't do that either. And the inclusion is my patients. I just ask them if they are able to enroll and are willing to enroll in the study, and they have to be between 23 and 65 years old and positive on opioid use. And because it is a novel treatment, if it does prove to be an actual treatment, all the other treatment options that are in our guidelines have to be tried before. So they have to have had detoxification and naltrexone treatment and suboxone treatment, etc., clinical and outpatient treatment. And these need to have failed, so then it becomes the last step in their treatment. So no people who are, I've been on heroin for 3 months and I haven't tried anything, can I do your ibogaine treatment? Any opioids, yes.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I'm wondering if you have some advice for how to deal with an ethics review board who is giving restrictions solely based on the subject of the research and not based on the dangers or the apparent effects of the substance itself. Because I'm doing a study which is based on a ceremony that's already been held, and the ethics review board is putting on some restrictions on my study, which I, as a researcher, don't feel are based on my part of the research.
Okay. I would always advise you to adhere to the as much as possible to the actual academic rules, because this is what they want to see. They want to see, is it safe? Is it ethical in the sense that you can show what you are doing? I don't know what the exact restrictions are, of course, but the ethical review board reviews whether you are doing ethical research, not methodologically, because if it's ethical and it's all flim-flam that you're writing down, that's your problem. But it has to be ethical. And so take the points that are made in the Helsinki treatment, just read those and defend point by point why you think your research is ethical, and then that's what they will then debate upon.
Thank you.
So let me take a question. There were some cases where people were dying during these kind of uncontrolled treatments, and in most cases it wasn't really established what was the cause. If there was a heart disease, preconditioned heart disease or something like that. Insofar, if I would be in the ethical committee, I would ask you for what do you think about these death cases? How do you exclude a risk which you don't know where it comes from?
We've reviewed all of the data and also looked at other substances that produce this effect. It's called QT prolongation. So on the cardiac rhythm of the ECG, there is, maybe you know this, the boop thing, and all the points have a letter, and the range or the duration of the Q to the T that prolongs, and it increases the risk of torsade de pointes, which is a ventricular cardiac problem and a very severe risk. And so what we, and the idea is that this is the cause of death in these patients. So what we have done is we do pre-study, we do an ECG, of course. Yeah. There is a cardiologist involved who, if needed, tests the patient. All cardiac diseases are excluded, and also other medication that gives QT prolongation has to be excluded. And then we very strictly monitor the patient, and there are some interventions that you can do to protect the heart from going into torsade de pointes, which is, for instance, magnesium supplementation. And people are on cardiac monitoring, and if torsade de pointes does occur, there can also can always be, because we are in a clinical setting on a university ward, we can do cardioversion and then in that way protect people.
I see that, but the cause is in all cases not really known. So it's a hypothetical mechanism, and you're taking care about that, but what's about if it is another mechanism behind that? You don't know, but however.
Yeah, no, that's true, we don't know. And so that is also...
Yeah, you can only exclude the risk.
I can only exclude the risks, and the ethical board was convinced that we have done the best that we could do. And also one of the reasons we are doing this research is because these treatments are taking place. They maybe not in a medical setting, but these treatments are taking place. So there are people at risk, and one of the major outcomes will be what are the risks of this treatment. So then maybe it can be regulated or should be regulated. But,
so the risk-benefit ratio is better than in view of that the treatments are already happen worldwide. Okay.
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 Thank you.
Thank you very much again, Thomas.